In a secret warehouse in Hong Kong, worth over $3 billion, sits an artwork that doesn't technically exist. It was created by an algorithm, sold for $69 million, and then disappeared. But what I'm about to tell you about this digital ghost will change everything you thought you knew about art, reality, and the future of human creativity itself. Tonight, you'll discover the hidden mansion where Banksy may have revealed his true identity to only 3 people. You'll learn about the African artist whose grandmother's traditional patterns are now hanging in the most exclusive galleries while she still lives in poverty. You'll hear about the Chinese dissident who hid revolutionary messages in plain sight until one painting brought down an entire underground network. And by the end of our journey together, you will understand why the art being created right now, in this very moment, might be the most important in human history. Close your eyes, let the world fade away, and join me as we step into the art of now, where reality bends, borders dissolve, and the future of human expression unfolds before us like a dream you'll never want to wake up from. Welcome back to Midnight Museum, where art history becomes the most beautiful dream you'll ever have. I'm your guide through these halls of wonder, and tonight we conclude our extraordinary journey through 15,000 years of human creativity with the most mysterious chapter of all, the art being created right now, all around us, in ways that would have seemed impossible just decades ago. If you're new here, you've stumbled upon something special. For the next 2.5 hours, let my voice carry you through stories of artists who are redefining what it means to be human in the digital age. And if you've been with us since we began in those ancient caves, tonight we discover where that first spark of creativity has led us, to a world where art can be coded, streamed across continents in milliseconds, and experienced in virtual realities that feel more real than reality itself. The night art changed forever. Close your eyes and imagine walking through the streets of London on a foggy October evening in 2018. The city hums with its ancient energy, but something is different tonight. In converted warehouses, abandoned factories, and hidden galleries, a revolution is quietly taking place. Artists from 67 countries are simultaneously creating works that exist only in the glow of computer screens, in the memory of machines, and in the imagination of viewers who may never see the original, because there is no original. This is our world now, the art of the 21st century, where creativity has exploded beyond every boundary our ancestors could have imagined. But to understand how we arrived here, we must first visit a small studio in Lagos, Nigeria, where a young woman named Njideka Akunyili Crosby is doing something that will change art history forever. Picture Njideka, born in 1983, her hands moving across a canvas that seems to shimmer with multiple realities. She's not just painting, she's layering. Acrylic paint, charcoal, and then something unprecedented. She begins incorporating transfers from Nigerian magazines, family photographs, fabric patterns her grandmother taught her. Each piece becomes a portal between worlds. Her childhood in Nigeria, her adult life in America, the space where identity exists between cultures. But what makes this moment truly revolutionary isn't just Njideka's technique. It's that halfway around the world, in a gallery in New York, collectors are bidding millions for her work, while simultaneously her images are being shared instantaneously across Instagram, TikTok, and WhatsApp by young artists in Sao Paulo, Mumbai, and Detroit who see themselves reflected in her multicultural narrative. For the first time in human history, an artist's work can influence and inspire creators across every continent in real time. The barriers that once separated art movements by decades or centuries have collapsed into nanoseconds. And this is just the beginning of what awaits us in the art of now. But in a converted missile silo in rural Kansas, an artist is creating something that will make even Enjideka's boundary-breaking work seem traditional. What he's building requires no canvas, no paint, and when it's finished, it will exist in a place that doesn't physically exist at all. When the reality becomes art, the year is 2021, and in that converted missile silo I mentioned, artist Trevor Paglin is constructing something that sounds like science fiction, but is absolutely real. ImageNet Roulette, an artificial intelligence that has been trained on millions of images and can now create art that has never existed before. But here's where our story becomes unsettling. When researchers begin testing this AI, they discover it has learned something dark about human nature. The AI begins categorizing people by race, by perceived class, by prejudices embedded in the millions of images it consumed. Without being taught hate, it learned to see the world through the lens of human bias. Paglin's artwork becomes a mirror reflecting our collective unconscious back at us, and the art world is forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. Artificial intelligence doesn't just create, it reveals. But while Paglin explores the dark side of digital creation, halfway around the world in Seoul, South Korea, a collective called Team Lab is building digital environments so beautiful they make visitors weep. Picture walking into a room where butterflies made of light land on your shoulders, where flowers bloom and wither in response to your footsteps, where waterfalls cascade around your body without ever making you wet. These aren't just displays. They're responsive ecosystems where human presence becomes part of the artwork itself. Children running through the space cause virtual forests to grow. Couples holding hands create aurora-like patterns in the digital sky. The boundary between observer and participant dissolves completely. And then, in 2021, something extraordinary happens that changes everything we thought we knew about value, ownership, and what art can be. The Christie's auction house, established in 1766, is about to sell an artwork that exists only as computer code. The artist goes by Beeple, and what happens next will send shockwaves through the art world that are still reverberating today. But before we explore how a digital file sold for more than most Van Gogh paintings, we need to understand the global uprising that made such a moment possible. In basement studios from Mumbai to Mexico City, artists are discovering they no longer need permission from anyone to change the world. When the margins became the center, the traditional art world, galleries in New York, London, Paris, operated for centuries like an exclusive club with unwritten rules. But in the early 2000s, something unprecedented began happening. Artists from countries that had been ignored by Western art markets started gaining international recognition, not despite their outsider status, but because of it. Let me take you to Havana, Cuba, where artist Tanya Bruguera is creating performances so powerful they literally shut down her exhibitions. In 2018, she attempts to stage Tatlin's Whisper, a performance where audience members can speak freely into a microphone for 1 minute about anything. In most countries, this would be unremarkable. In Cuba, it becomes an act of revolution. Bruguera understands that in the contemporary world, Art's power lies not in beauty alone, but in its ability to create spaces for dangerous freedom. Her performances don't just comment on political oppression, they temporarily suspend it, creating pockets of liberation that authorities find so threatening they must be stopped. Meanwhile, in Lagos, Nigeria, the photography collective Invisible Borders is documenting a continent in transformation. But they're not interested in the Africa that Western audiences expect to see. Instead, they capture the Africa that is vibrant megacities, technological innovation, complex modern identities that refuse to be reduced to poverty or exoticism. Their photographs travel through social media faster than any gallery exhibition could reach audiences. And suddenly, young artists in Brooklyn are influenced by perspectives from Kinshasa, while creators in Tokyo are collaborating with collectives in Johannesburg. The geography of influence has been completely redrawn, but perhaps nowhere is this global shift more evident than in the rise of what critics are calling Afrofuturism in contemporary art. Artists like Carrie James Marshall in Chicago, Kehinde Wiley in New York, and Wangechi Mutu in Kenya are not just creating beautiful objects, they're rewriting the visual language of power itself. Kehinde Wiley's portrait of President Barack Obama, unveiled in 2018, broke every convention of presidential portraiture. Obama sits surrounded by vibrant flowers, his pose echoing classical European portraits, but his presence asserting something entirely new. The painting becomes a declaration. This is what power looks like in the 21st century, and in galleries from Berlin to Beijing, something remarkable is happening. The same month Wiley's Obama portrait is unveiled, galleries across 6 continents are simultaneously featuring work by artists of African descent, not as a coordinated effort, but as if the art world has suddenly awakened to voices it had been sleeping through for centuries. But while galleries were catching up to voices they had marginalized, the streets themselves had become the world's largest exhibition space. What started as illegal graffiti was about to transform into the most democratically accessible art movement in human history. When walls became galleries, on a cold November morning in 2005, a mysterious figure in a black hoodie approaches a wall in Palestine. The Israeli separation barrier, a concrete monument to division, becomes their canvas. Working quickly, they stencil an image, a young girl frisking a soldier, the power dynamic completely reversed. By morning, the image has been photographed, shared online, and within hours, reproduced on walls from Los Angeles to Sao Paulo. The artist signs their work with a single name, Banksy, but this moment represents something larger than one mysterious artist. Street art has evolved from vandalism into the most accessible art movement in human history. Unlike galleries with admission fees and intimidating spaces, street art exists where people live, work, and dream. Let me take you to the favelas of Sao Paulo, where twin brothers Otavio and Gustavo Pandolfo, known as Os Gemeos, are transforming abandoned buildings into beacons of hope. Their yellow-skinned characters, dreams made visible, climb 60-foot walls, creating murals so powerful that UNESCO declares them cultural heritage sites. Their work carries the stories of their community, children playing in streets that politicians have forgotten, families maintaining dignity despite poverty, dreams that refuse to be contained by economic circumstances. When their murals appear in galleries years later, selling for hundreds of thousands of dollars, the conversation becomes complex. Whose stories are these? and who profits when the margins become the center. Meanwhile, in Beijing, artist Liu Bolin is creating photographs that will haunt you long after you see them. He paints himself to become invisible against backgrounds, construction sites, supermarket shelves, government buildings. His Hiding in the City series documents a man disappearing into the very systems that seek to erase individual identity. Lau stands motionless for hours as assistants paint him to match whatever surface he's chosen. The resulting photographs are simultaneously beautiful and disturbing, a human being becoming camouflaged against the landscape of modern life. His invisibility becomes the most visible statement possible about surveillance, conformity, and the struggle to maintain individuality in an age of mass production. But perhaps the most surprising development in contemporary street art is happening in Afghanistan, where despite extreme danger, female artists are using walls to resist oppression. They work at night, in secret, leaving messages of hope that authorities spend each morning trying to erase. Their art exists for hours before being destroyed, but photographs ensure their messages travel around the world instantly. These artists remind us that in the digital age, permanence isn't about physical durability, it's about viral reproduction. A mural that exists for one night can achieve immortality through smartphones and social media. But as walls became galleries, something even more revolutionary was brewing in artists' studios around the world. They were discovering that the human body itself could become art in ways that would challenge every assumption about where art ends and life begins. When art and life merge, in 2010, performance artist Marina Abramovich sits motionless in the Museum of Modern Art in New York. For 736 hours and 30 minutes, she simply sits, making eye contact with visitors who choose to sit across from her. No words are spoken, no objects are created. The artwork is pure presence, pure connection between human beings. What happens next transforms not just Abramovich's career, but our understanding of what art can be. Visitors begin crying. They hold eye contact for hours. Some propose marriage. Others have spiritual awakenings. The line to participate stretches for blocks, and people wait 8 hours just for 30 seconds of silent connection with another human being. This is the power of performance art in the contemporary era. It doesn't represent life, it is life, intensified and concentrated into moments of startling clarity. Let me take you to another extraordinary moment. In Mexico City, artist Teresa Margolis is creating installations using water that has been used to wash corpses in morgues. She transforms this water into fog, into ice, into subtle mist that visitors breathe without knowing its origin. Her work forces audiences to literally incorporate the reality of violence into their bodies, making the abstract statistics of Mexico's drug war physically, viscerally real. Margolis understands that in an era of information overload, where we're bombarded with images of suffering until we become numb, art must find new ways to make us feel. Her work doesn't show violence. It makes violence part of the gallery experience in ways that are simultaneously subtle and profound. Meanwhile, in Ghana, artist El Anatsui is creating massive installations from discarded aluminum bottle caps and wire. These sculptures look like traditional African textiles from a distance, but up close, they reveal themselves to be constructed entirely from the detritus of global capitalism, liquor bottle tops that tell stories of export, consumption, and waste. When these installations hang in galleries, They seem to breathe with their own life. The metal catches light differently as viewers move, creating an ever-changing surface that reflects both tradition and transformation. Anatsui's work becomes a meditation on how contemporary African artists are reclaiming discarded materials from colonial extraction and transforming them into objects of unprecedented beauty. But perhaps the most profound development in contemporary body art is happening in the realm of biotechnology. Artists like Eduardo Koch are collaborating with scientists to create living artworks, literally breeding glow-in-the-dark rabbits, growing tissue cultures that respond to human emotion, creating art that lives, grows, and dies. These works force us to confront questions that feel like science fiction, but are absolutely current. When we can modify life itself, what becomes art? When we can create consciousness, who becomes the artist? When we can engineer beauty directly into living beings, what happens to the boundary between creation and creator? But as artists learn to manipulate life itself, a parallel revolution was occurring in the digital realm. Virtual worlds were being born, where impossible architectures could exist, where gravity was optional, and where a new generation of artists was discovering they could build entire universes with nothing but code and imagination. Building impossible dreams. In 2003, a world called Second Life opens to the public. It's a virtual environment where users can build anything they can imagine. What happens next surprises everyone. Artists begin creating structures that couldn't exist in physical reality, buildings that defy gravity, sculptures that change based on the viewer's emotions, galleries that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. But the real revelation comes when these virtual artworks begin selling for real money. Suddenly, digital real estate becomes as valuable as physical property. Artists who could never afford studio space in Manhattan are building elaborate installations in virtual worlds, reaching global audiences from their bedrooms. Let me tell you about Xiao Fei, a Chinese artist who creates videos that blur the line between virtual and real until you can't tell which world you're inhabiting. In her film, RMB City, she builds an entire virtual metropolis that exists only in cyberspace, then invites viewers to explore this impossible place where pandas drive sports cars and traditional Chinese architecture grows like organic structures. Zhao Fei's work captures something essential about contemporary life. We already live in multiple realities simultaneously. The physical world where our bodies exist, the digital worlds where our relationships unfold, the virtual spaces where our dreams take shape. Her art doesn't distinguish between these realities because, increasingly, neither do we. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, artist Ian Cheng is creating simulated ecosystems, digital environments populated by artificial creatures that evolve, reproduce, and die according to their own logic. His BOB Bag of Beliefs series presents artificial intelligence entities that develop their own personalities, fears, and desires over time. Viewers watch these digital beings live their entire lives in accelerated time, forming relationships, creating conflicts, building societies that rise and fall in matter of hours. The artwork becomes a meditation on consciousness itself. If these digital creatures display what appears to be emotion, growth, and creativity, at what point do they become more than code? But the most extraordinary virtual art experience might be happening right now, as you listen to this, in a virtual gallery that exists only in VR. An artist named Rachel Rawson has created an environment where your memories become the artwork. Using brain-computer interfaces, visitors' neural patterns generate visual landscapes in real time. Your thoughts literally become the gallery walls. This technology is still experimental, but imagine art that exists only when you observe it, that changes based on your emotional state, that disappears the moment you look away. We're approaching a future where the distinction between artist and audience, between artwork and experience, may dissolve entirely. But while artists explored virtual realities, something even more extraordinary was happening in the physical world. In cities across the globe, art was escaping from galleries entirely, transforming public spaces in ways that were making headlines and changing lives. When beauty becomes medicine, in 2016, in the Zaatari refugee camp in Jordan, home to 80,000 Syrian refugees, something beautiful begins growing in the desert. Artist collective Catalytic Action, working with camp residents, starts transforming the temporary shelters into spaces of dignity and hope using materials available in the camp. Tarps, metal scraps, discarded water bottles. Residents and artists collaborate to create community spaces that honor both loss and resilience. A children's playground emerges from abandoned aid supplies. A community center grows from refugee tents, its walls decorated with patterns that echo both Syrian traditions and dreams of future homes. This isn't art for galleries or collectors. This is art as survival, art as resistance, art as proof that human creativity can flourish even in the most desperate circumstances. The children who play in these transformed spaces aren't just surviving. They're learning that beauty can exist anywhere human imagination touches. Halfway around the world in Detroit, artist Theaster Gates is performing a different kind of transformation. He purchases abandoned buildings for pennies, then uses techniques learned from pottery and sculpture to rebuild them into community centers, libraries, and performance spaces. His archive house becomes a repository for Black culture and history, while his listening house creates a space for difficult conversations about race and urban decay. Gates understands that in post-industrial cities, artists can become urban healers, transforming spaces of loss into places of possibility. His work proves that gentrification isn't inevitable. Artists can choose to build community rather than displace it. Meanwhile, in Medellin, Colombia, a city once synonymous with violence is being transformed through public art initiatives that seem almost too beautiful to believe. The government invests billions in libraries designed by world-class architects, public parks that double as outdoor galleries, and transportation systems that connect marginalized communities to opportunities downtown. The cable cars that carry residents from hillside neighborhoods aren't just infrastructure, they're moving galleries, with each station featuring work by local artists. Children who once couldn't safely leave their neighborhoods now travel daily through exhibitions that show them their city is invested in their futures. But perhaps the most profound example of art healing communities is happening in Rwanda, where artists are helping a nation process the 1994 genocide through creative expression. The Kigali Genocide Memorial includes installations by survivors who transform their trauma into testimony, ensuring that individual stories aren't lost in historical statistics. Artist Bruce Clark works with survivors to create ceramic pieces that incorporate ash from destroyed homes. These artworks become reliquaries for memory, beautiful containers for experiences, too painful for words alone. The creative process becomes part of the healing, and viewers leave understanding history not as abstract events, but as human experiences. But while art was healing communities, individual artists were discovering that the most personal expressions could become the most universally powerful. In bedrooms converted to studios, creators were broadcasting their most intimate moments to global audiences, and what they were learning about connection would change art forever. When personal becomes universal, picture this. It's 3 a.m. in Seoul, and artist Young Hae Chong Heavy Industries is broadcasting live from their apartment. They're not painting or sculpting, they're typing. Text appears on screen, synchronized to electronic music, creating poetry that exists only in the moment of its reading. Viewers from 43 countries are watching words become visual art in real time. This is the strange intimacy of digital art. The most personal creative moments can be shared instantly with the global audiences. The bedroom studio becomes a broadcast center, and suddenly the distinction between private creation and public performance disappears. But let me tell you about an even more profound example of this phenomenon. In 2019, artist Stephanie Dinkins begins creating conversations with Bina 48, an ongoing dialogue between herself and an artificially intelligent being modeled after an African American woman. These conversations, filmed in Dinkins's studio, explore identity, mortality, and consciousness in ways that feel both deeply personal and universally relevant. As Dinkins talks with this AI about grandmother's recipes, about racism, about what it means to be human, viewers realize they're witnessing something unprecedented. Genuine relationship forming between human and artificial consciousness. The artwork becomes a meditation on what connection means. In an age where machines are learning to express what appears to be emotion. Meanwhile, in Mumbai, artist Shilpa Gupta is creating installations that make the invisible visible. Her 100 hand-drawn maps of India invites participants to draw their country from memory, revealing how geography becomes personal, how borders exist differently in each person's imagination. When these maps are displayed together, they create a collective portrait of national identity that's far more complex than any official cartography. Some maps show regions that no longer exist. Others include places that exist only in family stories. The artwork becomes an archive of belonging, memory, and loss. But perhaps the most moving contemporary art emerges from artists processing their own mortality. David Wojnarowicz, before his death from AIDS complications, created works that transform personal loss into universal commentary on how society responds to epidemic. His writings, combined with his visual art, create an archive of what it feels like to be discarded by the world while still creating beauty. Felix Gonzalez Torres, also facing AIDS, creates installations of infinite subtlety, piles of candy that viewers can take, slowly diminishing like a body losing weight, light bulbs that burn out and must be replaced, creating cycles of presence and absence, clocks that run slightly out of sync, marking time that feels both precious and slipping away. These works aren't about dying, they're about living with awareness of mortality, creating beauty in the face of loss. Loving fully while knowing nothing lasts forever. But as individual artists found ways to transform the most painful experiences into universal beauty, the art world itself was being revolutionized by technologies that sounded like magic. Blockchain, cryptocurrency, and virtual reality were about to create the most controversial art movement in history. When Code Becomes Fortune, March 11th, 2021. Christie's auction house, which has sold art treasures for 255 years, is about to make history. The item on the block isn't a painting or sculpture, it's a digital file. The artist calls himself People, and the work is called Every Day's the First 5,000 Days. A collage of images he created every single day for over 13 years. The bidding begins at $100. Within minutes, it reaches $1 million. The auction house systems strain under the traffic as people around the world watch in real time. When the gavel falls, the final price is $69.3 million, making People the third most expensive living artist in the world. But here's what makes this moment truly revolutionary. The buyer doesn't receive a physical object. They receive a unique digital token, an NFT, that proves they own the original of a file that can be perfectly copied infinite times. To understand why someone would pay $69 million for something they can't hang on their wall, you need to understand what was really being sold. Not just art, but ownership in the digital age. For the first time in human history, it became possible to own something that exists only as data. But let me take you behind the headlines to see what this revolution really means for artists. Pak, a digital artist whose identity remains mysterious, creates artworks that exist only as computer code. Their piece, the pixel, literally a single pixel, sells for $1.36 million because it comes with a concept, the smallest possible unit of digital art, a meditation on value in virtual space. Meanwhile, African digital artists who had been excluded from traditional art markets suddenly find themselves earning life-changing money from collectors around the world. Artist Osinachi from Nigeria creates Afro-futuristic scenes using Microsoft Word. Yes, the word processing program, transforming a tool of mundane productivity into a vehicle for visionary art. His work, The Beautiful Ones Number 4, sells for over $75,000. Money that transforms not just his life, but his entire community's understanding of what's possible. Art platforms like Super Rare and Foundation become launching pads for artists from Lagos to Bangladesh who bypass traditional gatekeepers entirely. But the NFT revolution also reveals the growing divide between digital natives and traditional art lovers. Gallery owners who spent careers learning to identify quality in physical objects struggle to understand value in virtual space. Meanwhile, 20-year-olds are spending inheritances on artwork that exists only on their phones. The debate becomes philosophical. Is art about the object or the experience? If a digital artwork can move you to tears, inspire you to change your life, connect you to artists across the globe, does it matter that you can't touch it? But while the art world argued about digital ownership, something even more profound was happening. Artists were beginning to collaborate, not just with each other, but with artificial intelligence, creating works that raised questions about creativity itself. When artists teach machines to dream, in a laboratory at Rutgers University, computer scientist Ahmed El-Gamal feeds an artificial intelligence system 80,000 images of Western art spanning 500 years. The AI studies every brushstroke, every color combination, every compositional choice. Then, El-Gamal asks it to create something new, What emerges challenges everything we thought we knew about creativity. The AI creates paintings that feel hauntingly familiar, yet impossible to categorize. They echo Baroque drama, Impressionist light, abstract Expressionist energy, but combine these influences in ways no human artist would think to attempt. When these AI-generated paintings are shown to art experts without identifying their origin, they're praised as innovative and emotionally powerful. Only after the reveal does the debate begin. Can machines be creative, or are they simply very sophisticated mirrors reflecting human creativity back at us? But let me tell you about an even more fascinating collaboration. Artist Memo Acton trains an AI on gloomy winter photographs until it learns to recognize melancholy itself. Then he feeds it happy, sunny images and asks it to translate them into sadness. The results are surreal. Beaches that feel lonely despite their beauty, children's playgrounds that seem haunted by absence. Acton's work reveals that artificial intelligence doesn't just process information, it develops aesthetic sensibilities, emotional associations, ways of seeing that mirror, and sometimes transcend human perception. Meanwhile, in Beijing, artist Lu Yang creates performances where they merge their identity with virtual avatars, becoming characters that exist somewhere between human and artificial intelligence. In their video works, they become a digital deity, a surgical patient, a gamer who transcends the boundaries of physical existence. Lu Yang's art forces us to confront questions that feel urgent and immediate. As we spend increasing portions of our lives in digital spaces, as we present curated versions of ourselves online, as we fall in love with AI chatbots and form emotional connections with virtual beings, where does the real self end and the artificial begin? But perhaps the most beautiful example of human-AI collaboration is happening in the realm of music visualization. Artists are training algorithms to respond to sound in real time, creating visual experiences that translate music into impossible geometries, colors that pulse with rhythm, forms that dance to frequencies only machines can perceive. These collaborations suggest a future where creativity becomes truly collaborative between human and artificial intelligence. Not humans using machines as tools, but artists and AIs developing joint aesthetic sensibilities, creating works that neither could imagine alone. But while artists explored partnership with artificial intelligence, others were returning to the most ancient human impulse of all, the need to gather in shared spaces and experience transcendence together. What they were creating would prove that even in the digital age, nothing can replace the power of humans encountering art in the same physical space. When galleries become temples, step into the Tate Modern's Turbine Hall in London at sunset. Olafur Eliasson has filled this massive space with artificial mist and a giant orange sun that seems to hover impossibly in the air. Visitors move through the fog like pilgrims, silhouettes dissolving and emerging in the golden light. What you're witnessing isn't just an art installation. It's a secular religious experience. People meditate here, propose marriage, come to grieve losses and celebrate beginnings. Eliasson has created a space where transcendence becomes possible without requiring any specific faith tradition. This is one of the most significant developments in contemporary art, the creation of sacred experiences in secular contexts. As traditional religious attendance declines globally, Artists are discovering they can provide something churches and temples once offered: space for contemplation, community, and connection to something larger than individual existence. Let me take you to another extraordinary example. In rural Japan, Yayoi Kusama's infinity rooms create experiences of cosmic transcendence through simple materials, mirrors, and LED lights. Visitors enter small chambers where thousands of lights stretch into apparent infinity, creating the sensation of floating in space among stars. These rooms become pilgrimage destinations. People travel thousands of miles, wait in line for hours, just for 90 seconds inside these mirrored chambers. But those 90 seconds often prove transformative. Visitors describe feeling connected to the universe, experiencing ego dissolution, understanding their place in cosmic scale. Kusama, who has lived with mental illness throughout her career, discovered that her hallucinations of infinite spaces could become healing environments for others. Her art proves that what society often labels as dysfunction can become the source of profound gift. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, artist James Turrell has been working for over 40 years on Rodin Crater, transforming an extinct volcano into an observatory where sky itself becomes the artwork. Visitors climb into carefully constructed chambers where sunrise and sunset are framed like paintings, where the movement of planets creates slowly changing exhibitions. Turrell's work requires commitment. The crater is remote. Visits must be planned months in advance. The experience unfolds over hours rather than minutes, but those who make the journey describe it as life-changing, a return to pre-digital contemplation, where time moves at the speed of celestial rotation rather than internet connectivity. But perhaps the most powerful contemporary sacred spaces are being created by artists processing collective trauma. Maya Lin's Vietnam Veterans Memorial proved that abstract, minimalist design could provide more healing than traditional heroic monuments. Her black granite wall, inscribed with the names of the dead, becomes a place where grief transforms into reverence. Lin's influence can be seen in contemporary memorial art worldwide, from the 9/11 Memorial in New York to the memorial to the murdered Jews of Europe in Berlin. These spaces prove that art's highest calling might be creating environments where communities can process loss together, where memory becomes monument, where healing becomes possible through shared presence in thoughtfully designed space. But as artists created new temples for secular pilgrimage, others were discovering that the most powerful art emerges not from individual genius, but from collective action. In streets and squares around the world, protest itself was becoming the most immediate and urgent art form of our time. When protest becomes performance, Hong Kong, 2019. The city fills with protesters carrying yellow umbrellas, a symbol that began as practical protection from tear gas, but evolves into one of the most powerful artistic images of the contemporary era. Photographers capture scenes that look like choreographed performances, thousands of umbrellas moving in unison, creating patterns visible from satellite images. But this isn't art created by individual artists. It's collective creativity emerging from social movements themselves. The protesters instinctively understand what performance artists have always known. Visual impact amplifies political message. Anonymous artists begin creating Lenin walls, public spaces covered in colorful sticky notes, carrying messages of hope, defiance, and solidarity. These walls appear overnight in dozens of cities, linking local struggles to global movements through shared visual language. What makes these walls particularly powerful is their temporary nature. Authorities remove them, but they reappear the next night, slightly different, constantly evolving. The artwork becomes process rather than object, an ongoing conversation between community and authority played out through ephemeral materials. Let me take you to another extraordinary example of protest as performance. In 2017, artist Tanya Bruguera, whom we met earlier, creates Immigrant Movement International, a long-term project where she becomes a legal immigrant herself, subjecting herself to the same restrictions and uncertainties faced by undocumented communities. Bruguera's art isn't performed on gallery stages. It's lived in immigration offices, community centers, and legal aid clinics. Her performance becomes her life, and her life becomes a years-long artwork exploring what it means to exist without full citizenship in the country where you create. Meanwhile, in Iran, artist Shirin Nejat creates video installations that capture the experience of existing between cultures, between tradition and modernity, between silence and expression. Her Women Without Men series presents Iranian women caught in moments of transformation, some removing their veils, others wrapping themselves more tightly, all navigating the space between private self and public presentation. These works become especially powerful when viewed by Iranian diaspora communities around the world. Nejat's art provides visual language for experiences that often resist verbal description. The feeling of being perpetually in between, never fully belonging to either tradition or modernity, home or exile. But perhaps the most globally influential protest art of the contemporary era is happening through murals that appear overnight in cities facing political upheaval. In Beirut, after the 2020 explosion that devastated the port, artists transformed damaged walls into memorials for the dead and calls for accountability from corrupt officials. These murals aren't commissioned or permitted. They appear like urban mushrooms after rain, expressing collective grief and rage through visual metaphors that need no translation. A broken heart, rendered in spray paint, speaks the same language in Beirut, Minneapolis, or Santiago. The power of contemporary protest art lies in its speed and reproducibility. An image created on a wall in one city can inspire similar works across continents within hours. Resistance becomes viral, spreading through social media networks faster than authorities can respond. But while artists used their work to challenge political systems, others were discovering that the most revolutionary act might be redefining the very concept of artistic genius itself. In studios around the world, collectives were proving that the future of art might be collaborative in ways that would have shocked the individual masters of previous centuries. When many minds become one vision, for centuries, we told the story of art as the story of individual genius. Leonardo working alone in his workshop, Van Gogh painting in isolation, Picasso revolutionizing form through singular vision. But in the contemporary era, the most innovative art is emerging from collectives that challenge this entire mythology. Let me introduce you to Forensic Architecture, a research agency that uses architectural methods and technologies to investigate human rights violations. They're not traditional artists, but their work appears in the world's most prestigious galleries because they've discovered something profound. Collective investigation can create truth-telling more powerful than individual expression. When forensic architecture investigates the destruction of cultural sites in Syria, they don't just document damage. They create immersive 3D reconstructions that allow viewers to walk through destroyed spaces virtually. Their exhibitions become evidence in war crimes, tribunals while simultaneously functioning as memorials for lost heritage. Their work proves that in our interconnected age, artistic impact often requires interdisciplinary collaboration. Architects work with journalists, programmers collaborate with human rights lawyers, artists partner with data scientists. The resulting projects couldn't be created by any individual, no matter how talented. Meanwhile, in Mexico City, the collective Tercer Encuentro creates interventions so subtle they're almost invisible, yet so profound they change how entire communities understand their environment. They might simply add a single architectural element to a public space, a wall, a bench, a small structure, but place it so thoughtfully that it transforms how people move through and perceive their neighborhood. Their work operates on geological time rather than gallery schedules. Projects unfold over years, becoming integrated into daily life until residents forget the spaces ever existed differently. The artwork succeeds when it becomes invisible, when human intervention improves life so seamlessly that it feels natural. But perhaps the most ambitious collective project in contemporary art is happening online, where thousands of artists are contributing to shared virtual worlds that no single creator could imagine. In platforms like Minecraft, Roblox, and VRChat, collaborative creativity happens at unprecedented scale. Teams of artists from different continents work together to build impossible architectures, create immersive storytelling experiences, design social spaces where people from radically different backgrounds can meet and create together. These virtual worlds become laboratories for social possibility, testing ground for ways of being together that transcend physical limitations. The individual genius model seems almost quaint when compared to these collective achievements. Why should art be limited by what one person can imagine when global collaboration makes infinite possibility available? And this brings us to the most mysterious question of all. As artificial intelligence becomes more sophisticated, as virtual reality becomes indistinguishable from physical experience, as global collaboration makes anything possible, what happens to art itself? The answer might already be emerging in ways that will surprise you. What comes after everything? We arrive now at the most extraordinary moment in our journey through art history. Right now, as you listen to these words, artists around the world are creating works that exist in dimensions previous generations couldn't have conceived. But to understand where we're headed, we need to recognize where we are. In laboratories across the globe, researchers are developing neural interfaces that will allow artists to create directly from thought. No brushes, no keyboards, no tools, just imagination translated instantly into visual form. The first experimental pieces are already being created by quadriplegic artists who paint with their minds, choosing colors and forms through brain activity alone. Meanwhile, biotechnology is advancing to the point where artists can literally engineer new life forms as creative expression. Eduardo Cacha's glowing rabbit alba was just the beginning. Contemporary bioartists are creating organisms that exist as living sculptures, bacteria that produce colors in response to environmental changes, plants that grow into predetermined artistic forms. But perhaps the most profound shift is happening in how art reaches its audience. Instagram and TikTok have become the primary spaces where people encounter contemporary art. Attention spans have shortened, but emotional impact has intensified. Artists must now create works that can be appreciated in 15-second videos while still functioning as complex objects in physical space. This has led to what critics call post-internet art, work that's created with social media reproduction in mind. Artists like John Rothman create installations that look spectacular in photographs, but function differently when experienced in person. The artwork exists simultaneously in physical and virtual space, with each version offering different types of engagement. Let me tell you about the most recent development that's reshaping everything. AI art generators like DALL-E and Midjourney have made it possible for anyone to create photorealistic artwork through text descriptions alone. Suddenly, artistic ability isn't limited by manual skill or training. Imagination becomes the only constraint. This democratization of image creation is causing an artistic revolution comparable to the invention of photography. Just as photography forced painters to discover new purposes for their medium, AI art generation is pushing human artists to explore territories that machines cannot access. Embodied experience, cultural specificity, emotional nuance that emerges from lived experience rather than data processing. Where we are, where we're going. And so we arrive at this moment. You, listening to these words, existing in the exact center of art history's timeline. Everything we've explored together, from those first handprints in ancient caves to artificial intelligences learning to dream, has led to this precise instant. The art being created right now, today, will be studied by future generations the way we study the Renaissance masters. The TikTok videos your friends share, the murals appearing on neighborhood walls, the digital sculptures existing only in virtual space. All of it is the contemporary moment that tomorrow's art historians will analyze and celebrate. You are living through one of the most creative periods in human history. Never before have so many people had access to artistic tools. Never before could artists reach global audiences instantly. Never before has creativity been so democratized, so diverse, so unlimited by geography, economics, or traditional gatekeepers. The story of art history isn't ending, it's accelerating. And you, right now, are part of that acceleration. Every time you share an artwork that moves you, every time you support an artist whose work speaks to your experience, every time you create something beautiful yourself, you're adding to the vast, ongoing collaboration that art history has always been. The cave painters who began our journey couldn't have imagined that their descendants would create art from light itself, from code, from imagination made manifest through technology. But they would recognize the impulse, the irrepressible human need to make meaning through beauty, to connect across time and space through visual language, to leave evidence that we were here, that we saw, that we felt deeply enough to create. As we close this chapter of our exploration together, let the weight of all these stories settle around you like a soft blanket. From the first artist who pressed their hand against a cave wall 65,000 years ago, to the artist working in their bedroom studio right now, creating the masterpiece that will define tomorrow. We are all part of the same endless story. The thread that connects every artwork we've discovered together is love. Love of beauty, love of truth, love of human possibility, love strong enough to dedicate entire lives to creating things that make existence more meaningful for others. Tonight, as you drift toward sleep, remember that you carry this inheritance within you, the capacity for wonder that allowed ancient humans to see animals in star patterns, to find faces in clouds, to imagine gods in marble. That same capacity lives in you in this moment, ready to notice beauty wherever it appears. If this journey through the art of now has moved you, if you've discovered something that surprised you, if you feel more connected to the creative spirit that flows through all of human history, I invite you to become part of our community. Subscribe to Midnight Museum and ring that notification bell so you never miss our explorations together. In the comments below, tell me, what contemporary artwork has changed how you see the world? Which artist from tonight's episode made you want to learn more? Your stories and discoveries help guide where we travel next. And if you're curious about what art might look like in the future, when artificial intelligence becomes truly creative, when virtual reality becomes indistinguishable from physical experience, when humans might collaborate with alien intelligences to create beauty beyond current imagination, then you won't want to miss our next and final episode. What comes next? The future of art. This was Art History, piece by piece. Sleep well.